Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. A common refrain as a result of the pandemic is how much of a backward slide students have taken academically. Students who were on grade level fell behind as many as 3 grades. Students who were already behind fell even further back. The solution that many schools and districts have come up with is providing after-school, weekend, or holiday sessions, or even expanding their summer school options to provide extra support for struggling students. While these solutions seem to have worked to a degree, a drawback is that many students simply don't show up, choosing a wealth of alternatives to attending class on the weekend or during the summer. As a result, the focus of support shifted to tutoring, both in person and virtual. Of course, tutoring in and of itself is not new. However, the terminology describing its effectiveness may be. Researchers call it high dosage or high impact tutoring. To help us understand how effective tutoring is, especially this high dosage tutoring, today we welcome senior reporter at the Hechinger Report, Jill Barshay, who has written extensively on the topic of tutoring in our schools. Ms. Barshay, welcome to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go ahead and get right on into it, because most people will pretty much agree that tutoring is going to help their students get better. But I'm not sure that they truly understand that impact that it does have. So what are the typical gains, if there are any, that are experienced by students when they are being tutored?
That's right. Wealthy people from time immemorial have hired tutors, right? I mean, Plato and Socrates were, tutored each other. I'm forgetting which direction it was for a second. There's a reason that wealthy people hire tutors. It works. You learn things when someone's giving you a lot of personal attention. In the last 30 years or so, education researchers, together with tutoring organizations, have developed a very particular kind of tutoring. It's super intensive. And I like to use the metaphor in a hospital and compare the difference between outpatient visits and intensive care. And this new kind of high dosage tutoring is a lot more like an intensive care unit in a hospital, like when you've had COVID. And what it is it's every day, at least 3 times a day, preferably every day. It's in school, so it's a whole class session. Tutors are extremely well trained. They've had lengthy training sessions where they're working on a particular proven curriculum or sequence of lessons. And they're often tailored to what a student is learning in school. So, for example, if you're an algebra student, they know that you're doing simultaneous equations that week and that you need this background knowledge in dividing fractions, for example. And so the tutors are giving the right kind of content at the right times so that the students can fill back the holes they have. And so when students have this really intensive tutoring, the research shows phenomenal gains. It's always in these statistical units that are hard to translate. But one group of researchers looked at 96 randomized control trials. That's where students are randomly selected to get this kind of tutoring. And the average student moved from the 50th percentile to the 66th percentile in 1 year. Now, 16 percentile points to many people, it doesn't sound like a lot. That is a giant jump in education. And I know you know that. Especially
if you're talking about over the course of 1 year. That is a huge jump.
Right. And another researcher compared it to 5 months of extra learning beyond what a student typically progresses in a school year. And so these are not typically seen in education, and it's extraordinary. I mean, I know there are no magic bullets. Nothing's easy in education, but this is striking. And even before the pandemic hit, researchers were super excited about the possibility of using intensive tutoring as a way to help many low-income children who were significantly behind grade level.
So now one thing that immediately strikes me is because you mentioned that this happens during the school day, number one. And so I would imagine you have this team of people who are pushing into a classroom, because otherwise, how are they going to provide that tutoring? Where do you fit it in the course of a 6 or 8 hour day?
Exactly. The reason it needs to be in school is so that kids show up, that they attend. When tutoring happens after school or before school, there are too many absences, too many no-shows. But if it's part of the required attendance during the day, then you can make sure the kids who really need the tutoring attend it. And it can be done various ways. It can be done with 5 people in a classroom. And sorry, when I mean 5 adults in a classroom, and each adult is maybe working with 3 students, and you can imagine a set of 4 tables, and they're working together like in a little pod. It's really hard for schools to manage so many adults coming in and out of the building. And what I'm seeing a lot of is virtual versions of this. So I visited a school in New York City just a couple weeks ago. And I saw 2 human tutors working with students, but then there were 4 other pods of students working with a tutor virtually. So the tutor might have been in her home in Jersey City, but they could see the tutor over the laptop, and that's how they were working together.
Now, I would also imagine if you have your 4 or 5 pods within the classroom, it can get pretty noisy in there. I mean, excuse me. I mean, the noise level, just having a regular class of 25 students is going to be a particular level. Now you're talking about adding in 3 or 4 or 5 more adults to it, and everybody is off in their own little section doing their own thing. But the noise level, so how does anybody get to concentrate on what's happening?
Well, in this case, because most of the pods were virtual, they had headsets on. It was actually very quiet, and they were focused on their computer activity. For the listeners out there, we're on Zoom right now and with headphones, and we're quite focused, even if my daughter's making a racket upstairs. But there were 2 physically present tutors, and one of them was a bit loud, and I was distracted by it. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially for students who get easily distracted in the class, having all these other voices going around them could be quite distracting. But I've often said that there's money in failure. And what I mean by that is whenever you have a school or a district that is not performing well academically, it seems the government always is able to find money to pump into that district so that they can fund after school programs or weekend programs or hire extra people to come in and do certain things. But then as soon as there's a certain level of improvement that takes place, that funding is taken away. And then what happens? Invariably, those schools start to slide back again, and then it starts this whole vicious cycle. What kind of money are we actually talking about that it has been earmarked for this type of tutoring to take, or any type of support to help our students get better academically?
So the federal government appropriated $122 billion
with a B
to help schools recover from the pandemic. Now, they can use it for lots of things. They can use it for HVAC systems. The government is asking that they use 20% of it for academic recovery, and schools can choose within that what kind of academic recovery they want to do. The Biden administration, though, is using its bully pulpit to really encourage schools to try this high dosage tutoring. It's super hard for them. It's a logistical nightmare. And the typical educator is not an operations officer who can run it's like a new company. It's a new operation.
Right. And I'm imagining that, again, these are an additional 4 or 5 people that you now have to hire. How do you vet a tutor to conduct this high dosage tutoring?
So the schools are generally not running it themselves directly. There are outside tutoring organizations and for-profit tutoring companies that put together the package. And then the school pays the outside tutoring company to come in either virtually or in person to actually conduct the tutoring. And some Sometimes it's being run in conjunction with a school of education. So aspiring educators are at a university are working with students. In other cases, it's college students in their dormitory, just sort of logging in remotely. And there's a wide range. The good companies have pretty in-depth training sessions where not only do they learn abstractly how to tutor, but they practice tutoring online, and they are given critiques, and they keep doing it over and over again until they get it right before they work with students.
With the rise of all these different tutoring services that have come about, these companies that have come about because of the need, what are some of the challenges that are associated with that? Because I can imagine that you have different qualities that comes with it depending on who you go with. So what are some of the challenges that are faced by the schools and the districts when they see all these different tutoring services that are available out there?
There are many, many tutoring companies. It's like a gold rush right now. And it's confusing, and it's hard to understand what exactly is a high impact or high dosage tutoring that the researchers say to do. Because a lot of companies are marketing themselves that way, but their model is very different than the model that's been tested in studies. So there are companies, for example, that are offering 24/7 unlimited tutoring for all your students. And it's for a very low price. It can be as low as $40 a student in your district. And they're saying this is high dosage because in theory, if you have unlimited tutoring, you could use it a lot. But there's no curriculum. These tutors aren't coming into the school. It's all virtual. In many cases, you're just text chatting. I don't know if you've ever done customer service with Verizon or some company, and you have to talk to the chat bot, and then you realize at some point you have a human that you're chatting with, discussing your billing problem. And you're texting back and forth. Some of the tutoring sessions are like that, along with a whiteboard where you can work on problems together. But that is just very different than the intensive care type of tutoring that I was describing before. And very few students are voluntarily logging on and getting this optional drop-in homework help. It's not taking place during the school day. You just come with a homework question. And even if this tutor helps you with that homework question, that might not necessarily be the fundamental knowledge you need to catch up. And so it's not really well suited to pandemic learning losses.
I was going to ask you, when it comes to the actual, I guess, the definitions, now how we define high dosage or high impact tutoring, it seems like all these different companies have a different interpretation of its meaning. And because from what I understand it, and from looking at the research and just the terminology itself, it would seem that high dosage would mean not just from an hour standpoint or how much time on task you have, but it would mean in person. It would mean consistency. It would mean basically the same people. You're building a relationship between the tutor and the tutee for an extended period of time. And then, but what I'm understanding now is some of these companies aren't following that model, especially when you think about 24/7. Obviously, the tutor is not going to be available for 24 hours a day. How do companies reconcile that?
Well, the companies are venture capital backed and private equity backed, and they're just trying to get customers and contracts. All the research studies that have proven how powerful this high dosage tutoring is, they're all in-person tutoring. We don't have any studies yet on whether this in-person tutoring translates into the virtual world. We had one disappointing study in Chicago where it didn't go well. There were a lot of technical glitches. They had a lot of trouble recruiting tutors. They were volunteer college students, so it wasn't exactly the high dosage model there either. And the kids who got the tutoring, this was earlier in the pandemic, didn't do any better than the kids who didn't get the tutoring. But there was a virtual study during the pandemic in Italy where kids who got 4 hours of consistent virtual tutoring with a consistent tutor every week, they showed really good gains. And then they tried it again and they halved the hours, only 2 hours a week. but the academic gains collapsed by more than half. So when you have the hours, the academic gains fell by more than that.
Wow. You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is senior reporter at the Hechinger Report, Jill Barshay, and we are discussing the need and impact of high-dosage tutoring for our students. So you mentioned the study over in Chicago, so that kind of made me think about another question about what is the impact of virtual tutoring, especially when it comes to our disadvantaged neighborhoods, because as you mentioned, you have a lot of issues, technical issues that crop up, as well as the need to find qualified people to actually do the tutoring. So are there any other issues or challenges that we have to be aware of when it comes to how this model goes into our disadvantaged neighborhoods?
I'm thinking about this question, and I think there are some advantages to virtual. Okay. One is that because of the pandemic, there's a lot more technology in all the schools, and there's more functioning computers now probably in the typical classroom than there had been in 2019 before the pandemic. And teachers are more comfortable, students are more comfortable getting it operating, and I think they've set up better Wi-Fi connections and things like that. And then because it's so hard to find tutors right now, as you know, it's a tough job market. There's not help wanted signs everywhere. That the flexibility to use virtual tutors is good, because then you might get a higher quality tutor than someone that you're able to recruit to come into the school every day. So I see some potential advantages, and I know that some very high quality, high dosage tutoring companies, for example, Saga Education, that's worked in the Chicago public schools, and they've built a really impressive track record with in-person tutoring. They are testing with reputable outside researchers how the virtual version is working, and I'm really curious to see the data on it.
I would love to see the data on that as well, because I think in a world or an environment where the number of quality tutors is going to be, it's at a premium, really. You want to be able to expand their usage as much as possible, but there's also a downside to giving them all those people to tutor. So what are some of the the stressors on the tutor, the person providing those services in a virtual environment?
So I don't want to paint all virtual tutoring with the same brush.
Okay.
There are so many different ways to do virtual tutoring. You could imagine doing the really efficacious high dosage tutoring virtually if it's the same person every day, an hour a day, using a curriculum. But there are these different models, like the 24/7 drop-in model that I was telling you about. And it's marketed as one-to-one tutoring. But for this company Paper, which has contracts in Las Vegas and Atlanta and Boston, the way it works is you get online, and if all the tutors already have a student, they just slot you into a tutor who's already occupied. And the students don't know that the tutor's now working with two people at once. And then if there's a rush at 8 p.m. because everyone has homework questions, they just keep filling up the tutor's screen with more and more students. And so the tutor is toggling with, between 7 students at once. And it's just mind blowing, because one might have a question on French verb conjugations, and the other one might have a question on a 5th grade reading assignment. And the other one has a term paper, and it's like all these different subjects, all these different cities. I mean, this one tutor who's sitting in Baltimore could have a student in Florida, student in Las Vegas, and they're all different ages. And I don't know how you juggle between them. And so the student is in the middle of making sure they understand their, percentage change question. And you're quickly text responding to that. And then you have to jump to this student. And so from the student's perspective, sometimes they wait an interminable amount of time. Well, it's not interminable, but I saw one online that was recorded at a YouTube session. I was very impatient watching students waiting for a text reply to their homework.
I can imagine if I just have one question, one homework question that I want to get answered, and so I type in my question, and I'm sitting there waiting 20 minutes for a response, or even 5 minutes for a response. Yeah, I'm going to get frustrated. And I mean, and that's as an adult. So you can imagine a 11-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 17-year-old who does the same thing, how they're going to be and as short as their attention span is. So I can imagine the level of frustration from the students and parents in this situation. But I'm also thinking about the tutors themselves having to juggle back and forth and bounce back and forth between or among 6, 7, 8 different people on 6, 7, 8 different subjects.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of burnout. It's not that highly paid. I think the wages now are about $18 an hour. Earlier in the pandemic, it might have been $15, $16 an hour. And it was nice because you could, it was a nice commute. You could go from your bedroom to the living room to do the job, but it was just mentally taxing to be helping so many students at once. It's like being a short order cook during the breakfast rush. And it's, even if the student's only waiting 30 seconds, 45 seconds for an answer, it's hard when just time it on your watch. 30 seconds is a long time, and it feels like someone's not really paying attention to you.
You're right. It feels that 30 seconds does feel like an eternity. But what is the difference in impact between the virtual tutor who you can see on screen as opposed to that virtual tutor who you never see on, you just have that text chat back and forth with? What is the difference in quality of tutoring as well as the impact?
Well, we don't have impact data and studies yet because all this is new. But it's funny. I was talking today with an organization that works with schools on hiring tutoring companies and structuring the contracts. And they've been talking with students who don't see their tutors and don't hear their tutors. They're just 8th graders who are text chatting. And they really liked it because, this is what's hard for us to understand because we're a bit older. But and I like to see people the way I'm seeing you on Zoom now. But kids really like texting. And I think we have to be open to that sometimes they can feel close and relating to someone. And there's a lot that they express through emojis. And don't forget that they also have a whiteboard that they're both sharing so that, they're drawing together their math equations or, diagramming a sentence. I don't know if anyone diagrams anymore, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Now you're dating yourself. Yes.
there can be a lot of interaction without video and audio, which really surprises me.
And I guess you're right. Because I just can't see where, especially in a tutoring session where you really want to get the most bang for your buck, as they say. I guess I'm that old man on the lawn then that just believes that you can get more even if you can see the other person as opposed to just through a text chat. Although I guess this generation of students, they're used to it. And I think they actually do better because they're shy about being on camera with people that they may not know or be comfortable with. So I guess in a way that's their environment. And we have to get used to that.
And if I can just add on that, when I visited the New York City high school where there were the in-person tutors and the virtual ones, it was video and the kids hated the video and a lot of them had the cameras angled away. And I saw so much more engagement with the in-person tutor. So maybe I don't know, maybe there is something to the texting, but we need to have the most important is the impact, like you were asking before. Which model is helping students gain the most academically? And we just don't know the answer yet.
I don't know if you can answer this, but if you're privy to it, what type of the different types of training that goes into finding the right tutor for a particular company? I'm sure each company has their own training methods and so forth. In your studies, in your travels, what have you found as far as I don't want to say quality, but I guess the rigor of training that is involved?
Well, the great surprise is you don't need a certified teacher to do excellent tutoring. If
That's
you
what
have
I was getting at.
If you have a really good tutoring program with clear lesson plans, and you've hired tutors who like children, maybe they're former camp counselors, babysitters, people who like working with kids. And the combination of the two can be very effective with tutoring. Some companies insist that we only work with certified teachers, and that's their big marketing spiel. But in the research, it turns out that paraprofessionals, and as long as you're paying them and they've had extensive training in a particular system, it seems to be effective.
And I think that's the important piece right there. It's not a matter of necessarily the background of the individual, but it's the willingness. It's are they really good for children? Are they the type that likes to be around children? Because you can have PhD level people who don't like to be around children, and then that's just a bad combination right there. And then if you have a paraprofessional who has been around children a lot and they know how to develop the relationship and so forth, now it's just a matter of, okay, let's provide them with the training they need. Because now who actually provides the curriculum? Is it the company or is it the school that will provide the curriculum that's going to be used to help with this tutoring?
So it's a range. Some companies have a very strong vision of the right curriculum, like particularly for algebra. And there's really people say a scope and a sequence. Mm-hmm. It's step by step, and you know what kids need to learn, and they know what the typical gaps are and where they come up and where to insert them in the lessons. Other times, but even within that, when they come in with their own curriculum, there can be weekly meetings with the math department to make sure they're rejiggering it and coordinating it with what the kids are learning in the classroom that week. And that's what I see as being a very effective combination. Now, with this drop-in homework help, there's no curriculum at all. There's no lesson plans because you're just responding to random student questions. And usually the training is to teach through the Socratic method. And so you're not expecting the tutors to know the answer, but the tutors will kind of like a therapist ask questions. So what resources do you have? What do you already know about that topic? And kind of try to steer the student to find the answer themselves.
Gotcha. So if you had to, I guess, leave our audience with one final thought about how schools and districts and even the government can support our struggling students academically, what would that thought be?
So we have this model of tutoring that's super effective, and it works well in small organizations when you're working with a limited number of students, and asking schools. Right now the need is so great. Maybe half the kids in this country are significantly behind grade level. For sure, a third of the students in this country are really in the need of intensive remediation and need tutoring. But the idea of scaling up suddenly all this tutoring to everyone overnight, you can't do it quickly and you can't do it well. And so my feeling is to give everyone more time. This federal funding is going to expire soon. Maybe there's a way to extend it. And maybe there's a way that schools can pilot things and try them and fix it rather than trying to give it to a million kids overnight, because it's just a recipe for failure.
Right. As you said before, there's no silver bullet to get all this stuff done. But we would certainly like to thank our guest today, senior reporter at the Hechinger Report, Jill Barshay, for coming on to the show.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And once again, my name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.